John Wall and Bradley Beal combined for 58 points in Game 4, photo by Rob Carr/Getty Images. The first round of the NBA playoffs continues today with 4 pivotal Game 4s. Follow along here for the latest analysis and commentary from the Post's NBA reporter Tim Bontemps, and ask him questions in the comments section. Catch up on yesterday's games here. Schedule and results. Pre-game reading, comments section Q&A. The Wizards have knotted their first-round series with the Raptors after fighting back from an 11-point deficit at half. Manu Ginobili scored 16 points off the bench, and the Spurs won't be swept by the Warriors after all. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't easy, but the Bucks survived Game 4 to tie up their series with the Celtics. The Washington Wizards were in trouble. They lost half their all-star backcourt, Bradley Beal, when he fouled out with 5 minutes to go. At the time, he'd been the only player doing anything for them offensively, but then he got picked up by John Wall, the other half of that all-star backcourt, and with Washington's season on the line, Wall didn't let the Wizards lose. Wall scored or assisted on Washington's final 4 baskets, finishing with 27 points, 14 assists and 3 steals as he led the Wizards on a game-closing 14-4 run that allowed them to claim a 106-96 victory that evened this series at 2 games apiece. After spending all season espousing they were going to play differently when they got to the playoffs, the Raptors collapsed down the stretch, reverting to their old ball-stopping style with poor results. Now the series will shift back to Toronto for Game 5 on Wednesday, where all of the pressure will be on the Raptors, and the Wizards will have a chance to take control of this series. Bradley Beal was understandably heated after he fouled out with 4:58 remaining in a tie game on a questionable call, to say the least, when DeMar DeRozan fell into Beal chasing after a loose ball. It was, without question, a horrendous call, and one that could decide this game. That said, Beal put himself in this position with bad decisions in picking up both his 4th foul in the 3rd quarter and his 5th earlier in the 4th on plays he easily could have avoided picking up a foul on, but Beal didn't, and that put himself at the mercy of the referees in the game's final minutes. That cost him, and the Wizards. Now we'll see if it costs them the game. 12 minutes to decide how this series, and the season, will go. That's what the 4th quarter of Game 4 means for the Washington Wizards. Win and they go back to Toronto for Game 5 with the series knotted at 2 wins apiece. Lose, and their season is all but over. Washington fought back with a 40-point 3rd quarter, one capped by a ridiculous Mike Scott runner at the buzzer, to tie the game at 80 heading to the 4th. Bradley Beal should be back to start the 4th after missing the final few minutes of the 3rd after picking up a bad 4th foul. The Wizards will need him to stay as hot as he was before sitting, a potential turning point. Bradley Beal committing a very ill-advised, and completely avoidable, 4th foul just as he's getting hot. Wizards coach Scott Brooks sent him to the bench, which isn't exactly the worst decision given there have been a lot of touch calls in this game, and Beal was going to need a break anyway. Now, with the final 4 minutes of the 3rd quarter for rest, Beal can theoretically come back for the entire 4th quarter. How Washington fares without him, though, could decide this game. For much of the first half, the Toronto Raptors looked firmly in control of Game 4. The 3rd quarter, however, has been all Washington Wizards. A quick 11-2 run has erased almost all of Toronto's 11-point halftime lead and has the Wizards within 2 early in the 3rd quarter. More importantly, all 16 of Washington's second-half points have been split by Otto Porter and Bradley Beal. The Wizards need all 3 of their perimeter players to get going in this series if they're going to beat the Raptors. Porter has been quiet so far in this series, leading some to wonder, including me, if he got hurt when it looked like he injured his right ankle/foot early in Game 1. Beal, meanwhile, is now tied with DeMar DeRozan with a game-high 17 points. Meanwhile, in non-suit news, Jose Calderon is starting for Cleveland in Game 4 because George Hill is out with a back issue. Not exactly the kind of news Cleveland needs as it tries to climb out of the 2-1 hole it finds itself in against the Indiana Pacers. Well, the whole let's wear the same outfit thing worked for a half for the Cleveland Cavaliers in Game 3. Perhaps trying it again will result in a full game's worth of play in Game 4? As ESPN's Dave McMenamin notes here, the Cavaliers are back in matching suits for Game 4, black this time, After Gray for Game 3, we'll see if it has different results. The Toronto Raptors ended the first quarter of Game 4 up 8, a margin created largely because of DeMar DeRozan's ability to get to the foul line. DeRozan has already taken 12 free throws, and the Raptors 16 as a team. Washington, on the other hand, has only taken 4. With a quick whistle throughout for both sides, foul trouble has already set in. Kyle Lowry and Jonas Valanciunas both have 2 for Toronto, while Markieff Morris and Mike Scott each have 2 for Washington. Potential turning point in this game: 2 fouls on Kyle Lowry halfway through the first quarter. This is another instance where the loss of Fred VanVleet looms large for Toronto. VanVleet was the head of the snake for Toronto's bench unit, by far the NBA's best, this season, and his absence has been notable through the first 3 games. Toronto still has plenty of depth to lean on, but how it absorbs these minutes without Lowry will be telling. John Schumann, the stats maven for NBA.com, with a tweet that highlights how this game has gone for the Washington Wizards thus far. Wizards shooting 5 for 8 in the restricted area. 1 for 9 everywhere else. John Schumann, at John Schumann. April 22, 2018. Washington has gotten back into the game after a poor start, but needs to both get out in transition and start knocking down some of the open looks from the perimeter it is getting. Want to know why the Toronto Raptors are off to a strong start in Game 4 against the Wizards? Scoring in transition. That was the difference in Game 3 in Washington's favor, as the Wizards were able to get out and run in ways they didn't early on in this series. But to start Game 4, the advantage has swung all the way back in Toronto's favor. The Raptors have already scored 11 fast break points, while the Wizards have scored none. If that trend doesn't change for Washington, it's going to be tough to win this game. The Washington Wizards are off to a bad start in Game 4, much like they were in losses to the Toronto Raptors in Games 1 and 2 of this series. But at least the Wizards have one of the highlights of the day so far. This emphatic slam by John Wall. John Glazer, USA Today Sports. Manu Ginobili isn't sure if his Hall of Fame career will extend one more season or not. If it doesn't, it was fitting that what may have been his last shot in San Antonio was a three-pointer to salt away a game. Ginobili scored 16 points off the bench, including 10 of San Antonio's last 15 points of the game, to give the Spurs a 103-90 win over the Golden State Warriors in Game 4 of their first-round series, ensuring the Spurs would not be swept and extending the series to a Game 5 on Tuesday back in Oakland. "We are not a team that needs anybody to carry us," Ginobili said in a post-game television interview. "We need team play. We need to help each other. If we are going to play one-on-one against them, we will go nowhere. We made shots, but it was a team win." This was a game reminiscent of how the Warriors handled the preseason. They looked disinterested in the first half, throwing the ball around the gym and putting themselves in a hole they couldn't climb out of. San Antonio, meanwhile, went 15 for 28 from 3 after they couldn't make a shot from deep during the first 3 games of the series. It was a fitting tribute to Greg Popovich, who missed his second straight game while grieving the death of his wife, Erin, on Wednesday. "It's a challenge," Ginobili said of playing without the only coach he's ever had. "We've never been through this. Our leader is struggling, so we are trying to respond and play as if he was here. I hope he keeps pushing us from home." Ginobili is a beloved figure around the league. His Euro step has been copied by virtually every star in the NBA. He's never had an issue with any player, friend or foe. Like another aging icon, Dirk Nowitzki, performances like the one Ginobili had Sunday draw plaudits from everyone. That includes from his opponents, like Warriors coach Steve Kerr, though Kerr is admittedly biased, having played with Ginobili in San Antonio. "He should come back 2 more years, Kerr said with a smile. "I smiled when he made that corner 3 right in front of us at the end of the game." So typical Manu, 41 years old and 16 points, and hits the clinching 3. That's what he does. The story of the first half of Game 4 between the Golden State Warriors and San Antonio Spurs is pretty straightforward. The San Antonio Spurs have made threes, and the Golden State Warriors have turned the ball over. San Antonio is 7 for 15 from 3 in the first half, while the Warriors have committed 11 turnovers that have become 13 Spurs points. Combine those 13 points with San Antonio's 9-point advantage in threes made, and that plus 22 margin was what allowed the Spurs to go into halftime leading 56-42. The opening minutes of the third quarter, though, look like a different game. Golden State has immediately scored 5 points, forcing a timeout from San Antonio interim coach Ettore Messina to pull back within 9 at the 10-minute mark. Even if Golden State is engaged, though, the Spurs still have a chance to remain in control of this game. Doing so, though, will require typical non-shooters like DeJounte Murray, who is 3 for 3 from 3 thus far, to keep making shots they normally don't, as it has been throughout this series, though. This is about the Warriors, not their opponent. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't easy. But, after blowing a 20-point lead, the Milwaukee Bucks managed to survive and tie up their best-of-7 series at 2 games apiece with a 104-102 victory over the Boston Celtics Sunday afternoon. A tip-in by Giannis Antetokounmpo of a Malcolm Brogdon miss with 5.1 seconds left proved to be the difference in a game where the Bucks dominated for long stretches, only to nearly give it away in the final minutes with an indifferent second half. "This win is amazing," Antetokounmpo said in the TV interview afterward. "Even when they came back, we still moved the ball, we still executed, we stayed disciplined, and that was the difference in this game." It probably isn't right to say it's quite that simple, as the Bucks didn't look all that disciplined as Boston roared back into the game thanks to 34 points from Jaylen Brown on 5 for 8 3-point shooting, and 21 points from Jason Tatum, including a jumper with 52.4 seconds left that made it 100-99 in favor of Boston. But after Antetokounmpo missed a layup, the Celtics had a chance to break out for a layup to take a 3-point lead, but Brown was stripped by Chris Middleton, who had 23 points in his latest outstanding game for the Bucks, leading to a Brogdon 3-pointer from the corner to retake the lead for Milwaukee. A pair of free throws from Al Horford tied the game at 102, before Antetokounmpo's tip-in gave Milwaukee the win. Marcus Morris had a chance to tie the game, but his jumper clanged off the rim, and the Bucks found themselves back in the series. They are in large part because of Thon Maker's impact off the bench. He had 5 blocks for the second straight game, and changed the tenor of the series with his introduction in Game 3. "Unbelievable," Antetokounmpo said. "He's the reason this series changed. He's playing hard, he's making the right plays, he's knocking down shots, he's playing at a high level right now. This is why Giannis Antetokounmpo is arguably the game's most unique player. 7 feet tall, has the ball on the perimeter, and just drives to the rim and hammers one-on-one of the league's best interior defenders in Al Horford. Plus, the mean mug at the end to boot. I've written a few times during this Bucks series that the outcome will be decided by who plays better among the supporting players in the series behind Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo and Boston's Al Horford. Chris Middleton and Jaylen Brown have both been excellent in Game 4, but everyone else? Not so much. Eric Bledsoe, who was wretched in Games 1 and 2 before playing well in Game 3, has been awful again. Terry Rozier has forgotten how to play the past 2 games. Marcus Morris is 4 for 12. This game could come down to a very unlikely matchup, Thon Maker vs. Jason Tatum. Maker has made an impact off the bench for a second straight game, while Tatum has 16 points on 5 for 12 shooting. The Boston Celtics needed someone to breathe some life into them after a lackluster first half. Jaylen Brown has done just that. A 3-pointer from Brown, his 4th of the game, has him up to 27 points now early in the fourth quarter, and has the Celtics all the way back to within 3 after trailing by as many as 20 in the third quarter. The Milwaukee Bucks have once again gotten nothing from Eric Bledsoe, who has 2 points and is 1 for 6, but the second half has been much more about Brown, and, to a lesser extent, rookie Jason Tatum, who has 16 points. The Milwaukee Bucks dominated the final 17 minutes of the first half with Tyler Zeller on the bench. So what do the Bucks do? Start Zeller in the second half. Perhaps it will work out anyway for Milwaukee. The Bucks have been far superior to the Boston Celtics in this game, but this is the optimal way to play. Milwaukee should be starting Thon Maker at center, and then playing either he or Giannis Antetokounmpo at center for 48 minutes. That allows for the Bucks to have as much spacing as possible on the court, which they desperately need, and deploys their best lineups for the duration of the game. It's something they need to consider going forward. It is rare that the wired segments during NBA games offer any real insights into what the coaches are thinking. Late in the second quarter, though, the clip of Boston Celtics coach Brad Stevens talking to his team was instructive as to why the Milwaukee Bucks have built a big lead in the first half of Game 4. "When we're on offense, the ball is sticking too much. We are ISOing too much," Celtics coach Brad Stevens said. "We outplayed them till the end of the first quarter, when we lost our minds." Starting in Game 3, the Milwaukee Bucks changed their defensive scheme to switch just about everything, and to pressure up on Boston's perimeter players more. The result has been that the Celtics have short-circuited on offense, other than Jaylen Brown, who scored 15 first-half points, allowing Milwaukee to get out and run in transition and put multiple possessions together as the Bucks have built a 51-35 halftime lead. After Boston struggled in Game 3, the Celtics are shooting 30% overall and 20% from 3 at halftime of Game 4. Some of this is that role players are struggling away from home, like Terry Rozier, 1 for 7, Jason Tatum, 1 for 5, and Marcus Morris, 2 for 8, but some of it, too, is Milwaukee forcing Boston's players to do more than they're comfortable. That, as Stevens said, is causing them to lose their minds. As a result, Boston looks like it's going to lose this game, and have this series go back to Boston tied up at 2 games apiece. The Boston Celtics would have expected to win every stretch Milwaukee Bucks star Giannis Antetokounmpo spent on the bench in this series. That's why Boston getting outscored 14-5 in his time on the bench in the first half is such a problem for the Celtics. With so much firepower sidelined, Boston needs to out-execute the Bucks, and take advantage of their foibles, which will usually be intensified when Antetokounmpo is on the bench. The opposite happened in Game 4, though, which is why the Celtics find themselves trailing by double digits in the second quarter. The Boston Celtics are considered to be the deeper team in their series with the Milwaukee Bucks, even without players like Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Smart, and Daniel Theis. But it is the Bucks bench that dominated the latter half of the first quarter, and led Milwaukee to a 7-point lead after one. Jabari Parker followed up his impressive Game 3 with 5 quick points in Game 4, and has played better defensively than I've ever seen him. Thon Maker has done the same. Matthew Dellavedova's stolen attempt by Boston to roll the ball up the court with a second to go in the first and flipped the ball in for a back-breaking bucket to end the first. With 2 3-pointers to open the second quarter, it's now a 25-5 run for the Bucks and a 13-point lead, and the Celtics quickly find themselves in trouble in Game 4. The Milwaukee Bucks looked like a completely different team in Game 3 of their series with the Boston Celtics on Friday night. Part of that was because the series shifted back to Milwaukee, and role players generally play better at home, and worse on the road, as Boston experienced. But part of it also was specific things that changed for the Bucks. Some were obvious, like Eric Bledsoe remembering he was a quality NBA player, and playing like it, but there also were more subtle adjustments. Milwaukee switched defensively for a majority of the game, negating much of Boston's ball movement and forcing some of the team's limited creators to muster offense on their own. An injury to John Henson meant extended minutes for Thon Maker, who was lights out, much like he was last year in the playoffs as a rookie, with the ability to both space the floor, 3 3-pointers, and protect the rim, 5 blocked shots. He should continue to get big minutes in Game 4 to see whether he can repeat that performance. And, finally, Milwaukee hoisted 33 3-pointers, a trend they'd be wise to continue again in Game 4, as well. The formula for how to beat this Boston team is sitting there for the Bucks to take advantage of. They did in Game 3. Sunday's schedule and results: Boston Celtics and Milwaukee Bucks. Celtics lead 2-1, 1 p.m. ABC. Golden State Warriors at San Antonio Spurs. Warriors lead 3-0, 3:30 p.m. ABC. Toronto Raptors at Washington Wizards. Raptors lead 2-1, 6 p.m. TNT. Cleveland Cavaliers at Indiana Pacers. Pacers lead 2-1, 8:30 p.m. TNT. Additional reading: Aggrieving Greg Popovich won't coach Spurs in Game 4. Paul Pierce says it's time for John Wall and Bradley Beal to step up or break up. All my best games I was medicated. Matt Barnes on his game day use of marijuana. 76ers Joel Embiid returns to the court wearing a mask with goggles. Adam Silver, one of the WNBA's problems is that not enough young women pay attention to it. Get off her back. LeBron James defends TNT reporter who asked him about Aaron Popovich's death. Wizards defense isn't close to being good enough to get them back in this series. NBA, Twitch reached deal on 2K League streaming rights. Comment Q&A. Hop into the comments section below to chat with the post's Tim Bontom about all of your NBA questions.